हरे कृष्णा भाई प्रभु जी। दंडवत प्रणाम। प्लीज एक्सेप्ट फॉर humble obeisances. All goes to Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Rupa Raghunath Prabhu. Hare Krishna, everyone. Please accept my humble
Hare
obeisances.
Krishna.
All
This
glories to
is
Guru Maharaj.
my all class Prabhupada.
So I'll start with the Mangalacharna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advait Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुदीनतारणं परमानन्दं माधवम् श्रीगुरो परमानन्द प्रेमानन्द फलाप्रदा प्रजानन्द प्रदानन्द सेवयं मान्योजय नमा ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिते नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणे प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शृण्वन्ति आश्चर्यदेशतारिणे. So thank you very much for joining and exciting aspect from the perspective of the course that we are on the last of the 4 books, the Udeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, also the slimmest, the thinnest of the 4 books, only 11 verses, as opposed to the Isopanishad that had 18 verses, the Bhagavad Gita that had 700 verses, and the Nectar Devotion where we did 19 chapters. It's also, in a way, it's kind of doing things the other way around. The Nectar of Instruction is an introductory book. So as we will see, it's less a book of, or at least the initial verses, they're less a book of spirituality and more a book of morality, right? So it's what would be considered as a new bhakta or a new devotee book. So at one spectrum, we have that. Then we have the Bhagavad Gita, which takes one from being a new devotee to an advanced devotee. We have Isopanishad, which is a very philosophically dense understanding of the concepts that are expanded in the Bhagavad Gita. And then we have the Nectar Devotion, which is probably the most complex and the most anchored into Vaishnava theology, the more esoteric aspects of Vaishnava theology. So there's a reason we don't do it in that order. There is a certain order, but it's mostly to do with the keeping with the understanding by the end of the course, the students there's a certain amount of fatigue in the students. Now, if you had started doing the Bhagavad Gita now, it would have been a little difficult to digest. Right? So that's the reason we do Bhagavad Gita first. The mind is fresh, you kind of take it in. And NOI is one of the simplest books to take in. So we kind of put it at the end. So I'll do the introduction and the first text of the NOI, and then we'll have group presentations. Okay. So So these are just the covers of the NOI. On the right hand side is the newer edition. On the left hand side is what came out when Prabhupada was there. And for those of you who have gone to Vrindavan, you'll recognize that on the left hand side is the samadhi of Rupa Goswami, and right hand side is Rupa and Sanatan Goswami sitting under a Kalpavriksha tree, reading and writing the scriptures. The middle is the Radha Damodar temple where Prabhupada, before coming to the West, he wrote the commentary on the Bhagavatam. And this is kind of an artist depiction of Rupa Goswami coming and inspiring and instructing. But Prabhupada, from where he sat, he could see the samadhi of Rupa Goswami, and that was a big source of inspiration for him. So, as you know, two of the four books that we do in Bhakti Shastri are written by Rupa Goswami: the Nectar of Instruction and Nectar of Devotion. So we kind of have already discussed Rupa Goswami, one of the intimate followers of Mahaprabhu, widely considered as the leader of the Vaishnavas. So not only very, very erudite, very deep in bhakti, but also very beloved, very much beloved by both the Vaishnavas and the non-Vaishnavas. Very dear to Mahaprabhu. Two times he got. One is at the Dashwamekh Ghat at Prayag, and then other time for a month he was in Puri, and Mahaprabhu personally instructed him, and those instructions formed the basis of all the books that he wrote. So the seeds of the NOI were planted in the heart when he was actually observing Mahaprabhu displaying Mahabhav in his final years of his earthly pastimes. Rupa Goswami considered his older brother Sanatan Goswami to be his guru, and Jiva Goswami, one of the other six Goswamis, probably considered to be the greatest scholar of all times. He considered Rupa Goswami to be his Shiksha Guru there. His spiritual identity is Rupa Manjari in the spiritual world, a close associate of Srimati Radharani. And when Mahaprabhu came in the mood of Srimati Radharani, then Rupa Manjari came in the form of Rupa Goswami. So he's considered to be the Abhideh Acharya, right? So Abhideh is practicing devotees. That's why it's very important to sadhakas like us. Sanatana Goswami is the Sambandha Acharya, helping to understand the relationship. And Raghunath Goswami is the Prayojana Acharya, experiencing the perfection of one's devotion. So a little bit about the history of the Nectar of Instruction. So there is a book called The Teachings of Lord Chaitanya by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in which he compiles the instructions of Mahaprabhu to five very, very exalted Vaishnavas: Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Prakashananda Saraswati, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And you'll notice that each of these four have a slightly different mood. Prakashananda Saraswati was a Mayavadi. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a Brahmavadi. Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami were both Vaishnavas. Rupa Goswami was more of a Rasika, and Sanatan Goswami was more of a Sadhaka, if you can call that. So different modes, different instructions. Bhaktivinoda Thakur took all of this and put it in the teaching of the Lord Chaitanya. Now, Rupa Goswami, in these 11 verses, he actually summarizes these teachings. Now, of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur came a lot after Rupa Goswami, so it's not that he read Bhaktivinoda Thakur's book. They have read almost how Vaishnavas work, but essentially, Rupa Goswami did what Bhaktivinoda Thakur did, which was he took all the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to these four prominent personalities, and he summarizes in just 11 verses. Right? So it is said that, it is said that brevity is the essence of eloquence, that the greatness of a person is to speak concisely but with depth. And Rupa Goswami does that, right? Essentially, the teachings comprise, Mahaprabhu essentially summarized the entire Vedas in his teachings, and Rupa Goswami summarized the entire teachings of Mahaprabhu in this 11 verses. So very, very important verses. Prabhupada wrote the preface of the NOI in the courtyard of Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan. And the book was published on the 1st of January 1976. So Prabhupada was very happy. And then he asked how many copies were published. And it was said 10,000. So he said, why only 10,000? So the devotee said, well, because it's for devotees. And Prabhupada said, no, this is for everyone. It's not just a book of spiritual instructions. It's also a book for morality. So he said to publish 100,000 books. And of course, the books went very quickly because indeed it's a book that. So if you remember in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada clearly says that this book is meant for practicing devotees. So here he clearly says this book is meant for everyone, not just practicing devotees. Okay? So it was written before the Nectar of Devotion, and the NOD is an expansion of the NOI, right? So in the preface, Srila Prabhupada talks about Updesh Amrita. Updesh are instructions and Amrita is nectar. So that's how it gets the English name, nectar of instructions. So if you remember in the Isa Upanishad, there were 6 verses that were talking about Vidya and Avidya, the study of morality and spirituality side by side. Right? So morality is from a material perspective, mode of goodness, and spirituality is transcendental. Isa Upanishad talks about side. Isa Upanishad recommends that one should study it side by side, right? So nectar of instruction actually does that. It actually teaches us spirituality and morality side by side. The earlier set of verses talk about morality, and the later set of verses talk about spirituality. So it takes us from A to Z, from Shraddha to Prem. Prabhupada calls this the first instructions for neophytes, right? Because it's meant for those who are not practicing but are interested in practicing. It's also meant for those who are very, very advanced, because the later verses are very, very exalted. So Prabhupada makes 2 important points, that it is the first instruction and it must be followed strictly. Right? So important for practicing devotees that one should not give a morality under the guise of spiritual advancement. Very important. Yeah, that's what Prabhupada say, that even though at many places it is said that Bhakti is independent, Bhakti will manifest in demons like Vritrasur, it will manifest in animals like Gajendra, like elephant, or it will manifest in sinful people like Mrigarari. But those are exceptions. Like it's kind of like a person becomes very successful, and then the university calls him and says, okay, you're so successful, we're going to confer a doctorate on you, an honorary doctorate on you, right? So it's an exception. It doesn't mean that one person says that I don't need to study, I'll just become successful and get a doctorate, right? So it doesn't happen. So the point that Rupa Goswami is making and Prabhupada is making, that we should not give up morality and under the guise of saying that we are making spiritual advancements. Prabhupada also says that we should also resist. So one should not think that the NOI is talking about very basic stuff and then jump into into the more esoteric subjects. And Prabhupada says that instead of getting purified, one gets putrefied. And putrefied means that one actually becomes rotten. So the key themes in the NOI are things like mind and sense control, attitude, the purpose of ISKCON, guru-disciple relationship, importance of sadhu sangha, the grades and behavior and qualification of devotees, the stages and development of bhakti, right? And it talks about advancing from morality to spirituality. As we talked about how the earlier verses talk about morality and the later verses talk about spiritual advancement. So Prabhupada says that the Krishna conscious movement is the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread the cult of bhakti, to deliver the love of God, the chanting of holy name, more specifically, understand the love of Radha and Krishna. Right, so this is specific for Gaudiya Vaishnava. In the conjugal mood, Madhurya Pras, devoid of Aishwarya Bha. Right? And then Mahaprabhu says, write literatures to help. And so Rupa Goswami made this instruction of Mahaprabhu his life and soul. So that's what Prabhupada says, that the Krishna conscious movement is conducted under the supervision of Rupa Goswami. So just like Mahaprabhu left the Shastri, the 8 verses, which are considered to be the core of how to approach the holy name. So Rupa Goswami left us the 11 verses, which is the core of how to become pure devotees. So Prabhupada notes that Krishna consciousness is called a science because it's a process that yields predictable and repeatable results. Right? That's the whole thing about science, that you follow the process, you get a result. Next time you follow the same process, you will get the same result. You do it a million times, you will get the consistent result. So even though Krishna consciousness is dealing at a heart level, at emotion level, nevertheless, it's a process. And if the process is executed faithfully, the result is predictable and repeatable. And what's the result? That it invokes the love of Krishna. And it's repeatable, which means that if it works, if it works for Bhakta John, if it works for Bhakti and Mary, it will work for you. Prabhupada says one must promote oneself to the mode of goodness. Right? These are the instructions of morality. Right? And the mode of goodness is to repeatedly act as per the injunctions. So this is an important quality that one takes from the mode of goodness and applies to spirituality. So mode of goodness is to do the same thing over and over again, whether you like it or not. Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita gives the example of how the Brahman will get up in the morning and take a bath. Does not matter if it is summer or winter, if it is desirable or undesirable. Right? That's the mode of goodness. Now, when we are trained in the mode of goodness, we apply to spirituality, then it becomes the foundation of our sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti. So one chants 16 rounds over and over again, regardless of whether you like it or not, you're busy or free, your mind is cooperating or not. That is mode of goodness applied to spirituality. That you chant your fixed number of rounds, you worship the deities, you serve the Vaishnavas, and you do it over and over and over again, right? That is the mode of goodness applied to spirituality that will take one from the stage of Vaidhi Bhakti to the stage of Prema Bhakti. So the nature of the senses is that they are chapal. Chapal means that they want change. And Prabhupada said that this is a symptom of a mode of passion. And the process of sadhana is transcending the mode of passion, which is suppressing this tendency of the senses to want change, which is to do the same thing that has been prescribed over and over again, right? That is, this regulation is the symptom of a mode of goodness, and it becomes the basis of our success in practicing sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti. So devotees do not cultivate the mode of goodness as a goal. So this is an important distinction. So while they do cultivate the mode of goodness, it's a means to an end. It's a means for them to practice sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti, which is a means for them to reach the stage of Prema Bhakti. Whereas those who are more into Karma Kand, they practice the mode of goodness as a goal to develop piety and ascend to the heavenly planets. So Prabhupada notes that advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower, and there are factors that are enabling guidance by pure devotee living in a holy place. But all these are based on how the person takes and acts upon them, right? So one may be surrounded by all positive factors. One may be surrounded by devotees, living in a holy dham, maybe living in a temple, and making no advancement. Because it is said that you cannot force anybody to take to Krishna consciousness. So if one has the attitude of taking advantage of this, taking advantage of the holy dham, the Vaishnava Sangha, taking advantage of association of deities, then one makes important. So without proper attitude, progress is not possible. Example, people take initiation for many wrong reasons. Prestige, position, there's this notion of transfer of karma to the guru. Sometimes they're pressured by others. Everybody's taking initiation. Sometimes disciples, they do what is known as guru picking. So they'll pick a guru who is famous, or they will pick a guru who is very much charismatic or something like that, hoping that the greatness of the guru also makes them great, right? But essentially, the only qualification one must seek is that will I be able to serve the guru, and will I be able to follow the instructions of the guru. So everything has been given by Krishna's mercy. Ultimately depends on how we take it. So the 11 verses of the NOI, they are divided into these 5 sections. The first 3 verses are about Shraddha, which is faith. So these are the transitory verses from the mode of goodness to devotion. And the first verse actually doesn't have Krishna or Bhakti in it, completely morality. And then after that, Bhakti starts appearing. 4th, 5th, and 6th verse talks about Vaishnava Sangha. Verse 7, which is a potent verse, talks about Bhajan Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, and Ruchi. So you can see this is actually transcending 4 stages. And you can guess, what does this verse talk about? This verse talks about chanting of the holy name, right? And the holy name has the potency to take us from Bhajan Kriya, which is really speaking the beginning of devotional service, all the way to Ruchi, which is reaching a stage of enjoying. Text 8 talks about Asakti. And then 9, 10, and 11, these are probably the most esoteric verses. They talk about spontaneous and natural love of Krishna, bhava and prema. Right? So this concludes the preface. I'm going to stop over here and see if there is any questions, and after that I can start on the discussion of verse 1. So I'll stop for a few minutes and see if is there any discussion or questions on what we Yes, Kaushik Prabhu.
Thank you for the introduction for Nectar of Instruction, Prabhuji. So my question is, you mentioned something about guru picking. But I've at least heard that, okay, a person must select a guru with certain qualities. They should be in the parampara. They have like so many filters to pass through before we can like give our hearts to our guru. Or so how does a guru and disciple relationship work if we don't really, I, I don't want to use the word select, but how do we kind of get that introduction?
It's a very good question, Prabhu. Thank you for asking it. So there is a little bit of a difference between guru picking and finding a suitable shelter to surrender. Right? So guru picking is mostly on external factors. That, like I said, somebody wants to go to a guru who's famous, right? And that's guru picking. Um, now there may be many gurus that are qualified, and as you mentioned, and this is explained a little bit more in the guru disciple course, that what are the qualities that a disciple needs to see in a prospective guru, um, be a part of a parampara, achar prachar, practicing what they speak, and then after that comes the trial period, right? Which basically is when both the guru and the disciple, they see if there is compatibility. What the guru sees in the disciple is that will the disciple be able to surrender to my instruction? What the disciple sees in the guru is, will the guru be able to take me back to Godhead? So that's what happens during this so-called probationary phase. And then after that, one establishes a formal relationship. That is highly recommended. Like Prabhupada would give an example that there are so many beautiful women, but a man will marry only one woman, right? And he will marry it because there is some synergies between them. After he marries, she is the most beautiful woman for him. There's nobody else there, right? So once the disciple takes shelter of a guru, then at that point, he's the guru. So it does not mean that he disrespects other gurus, right? But it means that for him, the guru that gives him initiation has a unique position. Now he can have many Siksha gurus. They can take instructions from many gurus, but Diksha Guru is your anchor, right? And that's the guru from which you draw your sustenance. So there's a little bit of difference between guru picking and discrimination. Discrimination is highly recommended. Shri Padma, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for doing the video and doing it this way. When I started reading Nectar of Instruction, I was like, for the neophyte devotees, and then we're not neophyte. Yeah, I know we're neophyte, but you know. And then when I went deeper into it, I'm like, even I don't even understand really what is going on. So thank you so much. I have a question on first one, but for this part here, what if someone chooses a guru because of all of the wrong reason, and then after that they realize really what a guru is, and then surrenders onto the guru after initiation? Would that like still be valued and everything? They finally understand really, yes, this is why I should have picked the guru. Yes, I love the guru enough to surrender and I believe in the guru. After the ceremony, is that they finally realize that is okay? Thank you.
So again, thank you for a very practical question. And I think as ISKCON is becoming larger and it's becoming more structured, these things are also being addressed now, right? So this is also one of the things that's addressed in the Guru Disciple course. That yes, things might happen because of whatever reason. One may find a guru that's not inspiring to them for whatever reason. In some cases, the guru fall also. The understanding is that one takes shelter of another senior Vaishnava and gets guided by the Vaishnava. Right? So sometimes, the disciples develop aversion to the Guru for the wrong reasons. They think the Guru is not giving them enough attention, or the number one reason why disciples are unhappy with the Guru? Take a guess.
Because they don't follow the instructions.
No.
The
The number one
popularity.
reason is, yeah. Who was it? Who was saying?
Probably could it be that there is no personal connection?
No. Whoever is speaking, I can't hear. The voice is muffled. Chaitanya Ras?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. At least to me, it's like a, how do I say it? It's the attachment to the instructions that have been given by Guru.
Well, you're right. That's the positive thing. I was saying number one reason why there is resentment amongst the disciples for the Guru is perceived favoritism. So when a disciple sees that, there's a disciple with 4 god brothers and 3 god sisters, and the disciple thinks that my Guru is favoring this particular or whatever. The Guru is giving this person better service than me, or the Guru smiles at this person more than smiles at me, and then they start getting this, and this is when everything is bona fide. It's not that the disciple is a cheating disciple or the Guru is not a bona fide Guru, but if amongst the sannyasis or the Gurus, when they have this talk, like we have this talk of how to deal with Gurus, they have a talk of how to deal with disciples, and what is the cause of discontent among the disciples. Yes, there are the reasons, as you mentioned. There could be material attraction, not faith in and those are to be expected. But even among sincere disciples, perceived favoritism, it tends to create a lot of challenges for the Gurus, and sometimes it becomes, to the point that it's difficult to handle. Like Guru is visiting the city and lived only 2 days in my house and 3 days in that person's house, or did the morning program in my house but did not do the morning program. So after some time it becomes difficult to manage. Chaitanya Ras Prabhu, do you still have a question, or is just that
In reference to what you just mentioned, Prabhu, so how do you perceive that? Like I have seen that practically, I've seen that people thinking, yeah, he's staying in their house, and I've seen that. So how do you perceive that?
So,
or how do you process that?
How do you process that? Right? I think you can. It's there for a process. So one way to, and I can share something that Rampad Maharaj did. That he said that if you ever feel any aversion to another devotee, whether it's a guru or a god brother, the way to handle it is by service to that person. So if you feel that you have a resentment to a god brother or sister, that this person is becoming the teacher's pet or whatever, then the best way to handle is to increase your service. So Maharaj gives this example, right? If there's light, there cannot be darkness. When there is service, there cannot be. So maybe you feel envy. Fine. That's a part of our conditioning. We are full of anarthas. So we recognize that maybe we feel envy, but we have the medicine for it also. When there is service, envy will not. Krishna will not allow envy to stay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. So with your permission, I'll move on to verse 1. Let me share the screen. So the initial set of verses are all in Anustup Chanda, similar to the Bhagavad Gita meter. Later the meter changes. Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam, jiva vegam udara prastha vegam, etan vegan yo vishaheta dhira, sarvam apimam pratvam sa shishya. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So, just like we did in the Isa Upanishad, we did a thematic analysis of Prabhupada's purport, that what are the themes that he was speaking about. We'll follow the same in Nectar of Instruction. So, Prabhupada starts talking about Maharaj Parikshit's atonement, right? And he gives this analogy of an elephant taking a bath and then sprinkling mud again, or a thief promising the police and then stealing again. Or he talks about how the Christians they confess and they receive absolution from the crime for the sins, and then they sin again and then go back to confessions, right? So essentially, it's basically a losing battle. And then he says real atonement is awakening Krishna consciousness. And in Krishna consciousness, he talks about traditional tapasya, which is briefly explained in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And he talks about the Pancharatric tapasya, which is Rupa Goswami's method. Understanding that the traditional tapasya in the age of Kali is different to do. So the Pancharatric is Anga Bhakti, where one follows the do's and the don'ts of devotional life. So do is to practice bhakti under the guidance of the guru in the association of devotees, and the don'ts is to avoid the what is mentioned in the regulative principle. Now you notice that in the purport, Srila Prabhupada will write his own purport, and he will also quote from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's purport. Because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also wrote a commentary on the NOI, and Prabhupada sometimes he just merges it, but sometimes he will talk about it. Now Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has spoken this, right? So this we will go through in terms of our discussion. This is just to give you a overview of what it is. Now you'll notice that the word Vegam is described repeated 5 times. One of the person giving the lectures, he was saying Las Vegas is the area of Vegas. So Vegas is essentially urges, and Las Vegas, as you know, is Sin City, where you have an opportunity to indulge in all your urges. So urges are, so Vegas essentially translates to pushing, which means that it pushes one to act in a way against the better judgment. So the first 2 lines, it will list the 6 urges: Vacho, speaking; Manasa, mind; Krodha, anger; Jiva, tongue or tasting; Udar is belly; and Upastha is genitals or sex. And analytically, these 6 Vegas, they correspond to the various levels of consciousness. So as you know that there are the koshas. The anumaya is the most basic level of consciousness, wherein one simply looks at the world at a food level. That things around me are for me to eat, or maybe they want to eat me. And that's the anumaya. So this is essentially Jiva Vega, where the consciousness is completely anchored in food. Then Pranamoya is when one is aware of one's life, that I'm actually pran, I have life. Like animals, they can't be Pranamoya, they are Anamoya. But humans, they're aware of their fact that they are living. They can distinguish between living and dead. So Vachu Vegam, Udara Vegam, Upastha Vegam. So tendency to speak, belly and genitals, these are in Pranamoya. Jnanamoya is intellectual, where the awareness of the mind is coming. Right? So this is where one develops an appreciation for the finer things of life. Music, art, complex relationships, loyalty, friendship. So all that is coming from Jnanamoya, right? And essentially this is Manasa and Krodha Vegam, mind and anger. So what is Rupa Goswami saying? That tolerate them. So it's not saying, he's not saying that extinguish them or eradicate them, because the Vedas are much too strong for us. That's why this point is made, that they're coming from this Panchakosha. Panchakosha is essentially the very basics of our existence. We cannot just will ourselves to exist in a different way. We cannot just get up one day morning and say that from now onwards, I will never feel any anger. Krodha, gone. We might say we will not act on the anger, but we can't say that we will not feel anger. So what is the recommendation of Rupa Goswami? Tolerate them, which means that when they come, wait for them to go away. One of the disciples of Prabhupada, I was listening to his in a podcast I was listening, and he was saying that one of the most potent instruction that Srila Prabhupada gave them. See, once he kind of confronted Prabhupada, early days, right? So he confronted Prabhupada, saying that Prabhupada, I can't practice this because this is happening, that is happening, and etc., etc. Like he had a lot list of things that was not working, and Prabhupada patiently heard him. He looked at him and then said, tolerate. And the devotee, of course, when Prabhupada speaks, Prabhupada's potency comes through, and he said that changed everything. So, and Prabhupada speaks everything from the scriptures. So that's what Rupa Goswami says. Know that they are coming, know that they will go away. So tolerate them. Don't try to suppress them. You will always be defeated. But when you tolerate them, then you will always be victorious. So essentially, these Vegas are symptoms of anarthas. And as we know, the anarthas are very, very intrinsic to the subtle body. They've been accumulated over millions of lifetimes. And they essentially are establishing who we are. Right? We are actually a product of in the material world, we are actually a product of our anarthas. That's why we act in a certain way, we interact in a certain way. So they're intrinsic to our existence. And in Madhuri Kadamni, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he makes this point that the anarthas will stay all the way to the Prema Bhakti. So can you imagine Prema Bhakti is such an advanced state, perfection. Even then anarthas stay. And so at this stage, when we are neophytes, what hope do we have of eliminating our anarthas? Very little. So as long as the anarthas are there, the Vegas will be there. So which means there is no hope for us to eliminate the Vegas. Now it does not mean that we simply give up the battle. That yes, we cannot eliminate the Vegas, so let's follow the Vegas. Right? Rupa Goswami says there is a solution. Tolerate them. So why does Rupa Goswami write this as the first statement in NOI, right? So you notice that there is no Krishna in this verse. There is no Bhakti in this verse, because not meant for devotees. Not that devotees should not read it, but it is meant for even those who are not devotees. Right. So now the question is that if the verse is talking about the neophytes, then why is it saying that such a person is qualified to become the spiritual master for the entire world? So I'm reading it, I'm reading the first verse. I'm still struggling with my Vegas, with my pushings. And Rupa Goswami says that tolerate this pushings and you'll become the spiritual master of the universe, of the whole world. And I'm like, I can't even become my own spiritual master. Forget about, I have no desire to become the spiritual master for the whole world. So what is Rupa Goswami's intention in putting this verse right at the beginning? So for that, we have to go to Nectar of Devotion. So in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami mentions that Abhiday, or the practice of bhakti, begins with Guru Padya Ashraya. So if you look at the stages of bhakti, there is Shraddha, Sadhu Sang, and then Bhajan Kriya. So Bhajan Kriya is Abhiday. That's when you start practicing devotional service. And that starts with Guru Padya Ashraya, which means when you take shelter of a spiritual master. Now the question is, how do you know which is the person that is qualified for you to take shelter? So this verse gives us the qualification of a guru. Now you see the genius of Rupa Goswami, that he is accomplishing two things in this verse. He is giving a neophyte a way to start making advancements towards spirituality. That you have this Vegas, you learn to tolerate them. But then the neophyte also needs to take shelter of a guru. And what is the qualification of a guru? One who is actually able to tolerate this Vegas. So the flip side is, one looks around and sees that there is a person who's sitting on the guru seat, but no Vacho Vegam, talking all kinds of nonsense, right? Prabhupada says Vacho Vegam is also not talking from the scriptures, right? Talking about politics, talking about material things, right? Or Krodha Vegam, the person is short-tempered. But then he says, make me your guru, right? Or no Udar Prastha Vegam, right? He has no control over his tongue, speaks nonsense, eats all kind of food, etc. And it's not that this is a theoretical concept. Even to this day, you will, if you go and, because at least my experience has a lot been in India, you will see people who are unable to control any of the six urges, but they are sitting on the seat and with their hands raised in the Ashirvad Mudra, saying that come and become my guru. All you have to do is to read the first verse of Nectar of Instruction, and you become discerning in terms of who you should approach for shelter. At the same time, you also take the first step towards spirituality by learning to control the impact of this urges. That makes you a qualified disciple, right? So we see Rupa Goswami accomplishing both these things, right? The Prabhupada said Goswami is not just wearing saffron or holding a danda. Or I don't know if you have noticed, but I've noticed, at least in these days, these gurus, within quotes, the tilaks have become like a fashion statement. I mean, there are so many kinds of tilaks that have come up. There are angular tilaks, and there are very intricate tilaks in which they make the Om, and there are tilaks that look like the radiant sun. I mean, the whole forehead has become like a canvas, and everybody is trying to come up with it's like a fashion statement. Everybody's trying to come up with the most attractive tilak. So that's not the qualification, right? Tilak should be according to the sampradaya, and not just wearing saffron. Saffron means that it's a secondary thing. You live a life of renunciation. So the guru is the dhira who is. So you of course, in the initial stages, you don't know the mind of the Guru. Right? So all that you can do is observe the behavior of the Guru. And the behavior of the Guru is how well is he able to tolerate these pushings. So these are the qualities one should look for in a Guru, and these are qualities that one must begin to cultivate in oneself. So Prabhupada has given 3 overarching points. He mentions that the real knowledge comes from the Vedas. So one must know what to do and what not to do only as per the Vedas. Right? Krishna makes the same point in Bhagavad Gita, especially in 16th chapter, makes the same point in the Upanishad, the Vidya part. Second, Prabhupada says practice makes perfect. And so one cannot aspire for perfection without practice. So one has to go through the stage of sadhana vedi, bhakti, before they reach the stage of raga and prema. And Prabhupada says that another way to engage the senses another way to pacify the senses is to engage them. Right? And he said there are 2 ways to engage them, favorably and unfavorably. So engaging the senses favorably is engaging them as per the scriptures. Right? So when you engage them as per the scriptures, then they are favorably engaged. And then the Vedas become pacified. So Prabhupada speaks about it, gives different instances, but these are the 3 overarching points that he makes in his purport. The Prabhupada gives us the secret of Krishna consciousness: engage the senses to control the urges as opposed to the denial of the senses. This is the big secret of success for practicing devotees. Right? They are not in the business of denying the senses. They are in the business of engaging the senses according to the injunctions of the scriptures. Right? So Prabhupada, these are some of the practical tips that he has given in different times to his disciples. Sadhana, the practice, right? We are fighting against millions of lifetimes of different conditioning. It's not going to happen overnight. Practice. Become so busy in service that there is no time or energy left for indulging in the senses. And at different points we have had experience for this. Right? Recently we had our group was cooking in the temple for the Sunday feast. So from early morning to pretty much 2 o'clock, it was just one blur. Everybody working together, everybody working hard. And when you're so absorbed in the service, there's no time for anything, no time for anything else. Chanting, no big surprise. Prabhupada takes shelter of Lord Balram. And Balram is considered to be the original spiritual master. And Prabhupada, this is more out of humility. So once a disciple went to Prabhupada and said that, I find it difficult to chant. Prabhupada said, even I find it difficult. And the disciple was like taken aback. But the point that Prabhupada was making is that you should expect it to be difficult. If it is easy, then probably it is not something that is going to give you real benefit. If somebody comes and tells you that you do whatever you do, but come every Sunday and confess to your sins, and then you do whatever you do and come on Sunday and confess your sins, you know for a fact it's not going to work. Right? So expect it to be difficult. So the understanding that our spiritual senses are given to us to engage them in Krishna service. Right? So once we understand that our senses are not meant for exclusively serving us. Now, when we serve Krishna, we are also happy. Right? It's not that it's a zero-sum game that we serve Krishna and we are unhappy. But if we are exclusively serving ourselves, we are basically misusing the intent of the senses. So we'll quickly go over the 6 Vegas, Vacho Vegam. Let's see how I'm doing with time. Okay. Rup Raghunath Prabhu, I'm not able to see on the screen. How many minutes do I have?
Prabhu, it's 8:55.
Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, okay. So I have much lesser time than I thought. Okay, so I will not be able to do the 6. I'll take a few minutes over, but I'd like to finish this verse. So Vacho Vegam is control of the senses, and Prabhupada says that use it in the service of Krishna. Right. So this is the essence of Vacho Vegam. The interesting pastime related to this, there was a disciple of Prabhupada called Omkar Das, early days, and he was diagnosed with a terminal disease. So he went to Prabhupada saying, I'm dying, the doctors have said I'm not going to survive. So Prabhupada actually gave Babaji initiation. He's the only person in ISKCON who ever got Babaji initiation. So he took Babaji initiation, went to Mayapur. He was chanting 24 hours a day over there. And he was waiting to die, but he didn't die. He kept chanting and he kept waiting to die, but didn't die. So after some time, he got a little suspicious. Why am I not dying? So he went to the doctor. And the doctor said, I don't see any symptom of the disease. Right? So that is the power of chanting. Unfortunately for this, once he became healthy, he left ISKCON. So not sure what happened to him after that. And Prabhupada never gave anybody else Babaji initiation or that. So we know that if we misuse our senses at a gross level, it is prajalpa. Speaking gossip. At a subtle level, it's philosophical speculations. But if you're using it at a spiritual level, it is Krishna Katha. Then Manovegam of the mind. So the nature of the mind is Sankalp Vikalp. Sankalp is conviction or commitment to enjoy. Right? So it is Avirod Priti. And Vikalpa is to not, is commitment to not do anything, to reject. So Vikalpa is basically anger at frustrations. So, so the mind is like the frenemy. Frenemy is more like a contemplative word. It's a friend and an enemy. So Krishna makes this point to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. If your mind is trained, it's your biggest friend. If your mind is untrained, it is your biggest enemy. So Prabhupada talks about making the mind your friend, practical instructions. Wake up in the morning, worship Guru and Krishna, chant, study the scriptures, listen to lectures and bhajans. And if it is done day after day, the mind will automatically become your friend. Then third is Krodha Vegam. Right? So as we know in 262, Krishna makes this point that Dhyayate Sangas Kama Krodha, that one thinks, from thinking one gets attachment, from that attachment comes lust, and lust then finally culminates into anger. So as devotee by nature is humble. So he does not get angry at being personally insulted, right? So he learns to tolerate and control anger. So how do we tolerate? How do we control anger? One is by philosophical means. Right? So when there is an adverse situation, when this cycle of sangas and kama has already activated, we had attachment for something, there was frustration, and it resulted in failure, then philosophically looking at it, then maybe it was not meant to be. Maybe my karma was setting me up for this kind of suffering. Maybe if I react, I'm going to set myself another cycle of suffering. So this is by philosophical means. Practical way, Prabhupada also talks about, in this world you have to fake anger. Like if you're completely without anger, people might take advantage. So the example of Nagmuni and the serpent, right? The serpent became so docile that everybody would beat it up. And the Nagmuni said, you show your fangs. Don't need to bite, but show your fangs. So sometimes, so the difference between real and fake anger is real anger controls you, fake anger you control. Prabhupada would become angry at his disciples, but he used anger as a means to an end. Like in Mayapur, one of the disciples gives the example, Prabhupada was sitting amongst a group of his disciples and they were having some nice philosophical discussion. And one of the disciples came in and he had made some big mistake. And Prabhupada was very, very grave and angry at him. He chastised him and said, this is what you've done wrong, this is what you should do. The disciple gave the obeisances, went away. And then Prabhupada turned and started resuming his discussion. Right, so the anger did not stay for even 1 second after the situation went away. So this is, of course, Prabhupada using anger as a way of helping the disciple. We don't have disciples, but at least we can use anger if need be for protecting ourselves. But the difference is we don't come under the control of anger, right? So forgiveness does not mean condoning. So one thinks that if one does not accept the other person's behavior, then they have to be angry at them. It's not necessary, right? You may forgive the person, but you do not have to condone this. Somebody steals. Does not. So if you forgive it, does not mean you're saying that stealing is a good thing. You can still go to the person and say it's a bad thing to steal. But forgiving means that you don't hold it against the person, right? You don't say that now I will steal from the person, or that person has no standing with you. And finally, Prabhupada says how anger can be used as a service to the devotees and the Lord. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagai Madai, when they heard Nityanand Prabhu, Hanuman serving Lord Ram, Arjun serving Krishna, Guru serving disciples, all cases where anger is used as a service. Okay, Jiva Vegam is the urge to taste. And Bhaktisiddhanta, he makes this interesting observation that the demands of the body can be divided into 3 categories. The demands of the tongue, the belly and genitals, and they are situated in a straight line. So one can understand that they begin from the tongue and they culminate in the genitals. So if one is able to control the tongue, the belly is controlled. If one is able to control the belly, the genitals are controlled. And so it's this cascading cause and effect. So in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said the person who runs here and there to gratify his palate and who is always attached to the desires of his stomach and genitals is unable to attain Krishna. Prabhupada in the purport says that we should chant the prayer, eat in proper quantity, do not allow the tongue to decide what we eat, do not eat food that has not been cooked with proper consciousness, not been offered to Krishna. And in the purport, it talks about food in the mode of ignorance, like meat and intoxicants, food in the mode of passion, which is very spicy or chili. This is picking up from Bhagavad Gita. In the mode of goodness, which is vegetables. And he equates them all in the same category as Jiva Vegam, right? It's interesting, Prabhupada says that vegetarianism is a material mode of goodness. So Prabhupada coined this term Krishnatarian, which means that once a disciple came to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I'm a pure vegetarian. And Prabhupada said, even pigeons are vegetarians. So what's the big deal? One has to be a Krishnatarian, which means one should develop a taste for only Krishna Prasad. 5th is Udara Vegam, right? So the belly is linked to it's at an existential level. That since the belly is connected to the pran, so it is also connected to one's sense of living. So we see that there are people who have eating disorders, and the reason that they eat a lot is not because they have a metabolism problem, but because they have this existential crisis. Sometimes when the relationships break, then people compensate by eating a lot. And essentially, it is filling the belly, because the belly is connected to the pran, and it gives an assurance that yes, you are existing. So the tongue is going after satiation, like it is tongue is going after taste, that they should taste well. The belly is going after satiation, that it is trying to give this sense of fulfillment, that yes, you do exist, you're a person that exists. That's why things like obesity, etc., they're also treated as a psychological disorder, because people eat because they feel that their existence is being threatened. Also a sign of material attachment. Right? So controlling the belly helps in developing detachment. And Prabhupada says that it shrinks the size of the stomach, lowers the intensity of the fire of digestion. And Prabhupada recommends eat at regulated time, only eat when hungry. Don't just eat for the sake of eating. Prabhupada, one should take prasad at scheduled time. One should not eat in restaurants or sweetmeat shops simply to satisfy the whims of the tongue or belly. If you stick to the principle of taking only prasad, the urges of the belly and tongue can be controlled. Spiritual fasting is recommended, right? Fasting on Ekadashi, Janmashtami, other festivals, right? And this example is given that when a yogi falls, he becomes a bhogi, and when one falls from a bhogi, it becomes a rogi. Rogi means diseases, right? At one end of the spectrum, the yogi who is controlling his senses, the bhogi that is indulging in the senses, and a rogi in which the senses are essentially broken. The sixth is prastavega, or the genitals. Same point is made again, that they are in a straight line. And Prabhupada talks about 8 aspects of the sex life which are strictly avoided, right? Or which are considered to be illicit sex. So one should aspire to avoid them. So thinking, including the dreaming about items related to sex life, discussing about topics related to sex life of women, and it's women or men. So it's not that only men are subject to this, but men are more subject to it. And for the sake of brevity, instead of saying men/woman, woman/men, the predominant gender used is men over here, right? But one should not think that it attacks only the men. Then reading prohibited literature. This is like reading literature about sex, etc. Too much association or with the opposite sex, or even with the same sex in a sexual way. Then hearing about related topics. And Prabhupada talks about things that he observed looking at women, watching movies, illustrations. The Prabhupada said women are asked to dress conservatively, not to demean them, but as a service to the society, their own gender and themselves. So in 140, Arjun says that how in the degradation of the society, one of the key facts is polluted woman, right? When a religion is prominent in the family, the women become polluted, and then degradation of womanhood comes unwanted progeny, then the social projects stop, and society is gone. So it just talks about the fact that women have a lot more power in their hand than men. So acknowledging that they have the power in a mood of service. Prabhupada says talking is powerful since it develops strong attraction. Intimate means alone or about certain subjects. Like the Prabhupada was so particular about it that he would actually not even talk with his sister alone. And this is Prabhupada in being Prabhupada, right? Complete control of his senses, old person. In the mid-70s, Pishima, his sister, also very old. But those disciples were sharing how I think it was Yamuna Mataji, she was sharing that Prabhupada was talking to Pishima, and they were talking in Bengali, and Yamuna Mataji had no idea what they were talking about, so she gave obeisances and began to leave. And then Prabhupada said, please sit here, don't leave. And then she could understand why. So, Prabhupada was a sannyasi. For us, maybe we don't have, most of us are householders, but the underlying principle is talking in this mood of intimacy or sexual endeavor. These are actual there. So the conclusion is the theme of the NOI that you can only serve one master. You can either serve your senses or you can serve Krishna. So when you serve your senses, you become Godas. When you serve Krishna, you are Goswami. When you're controller of the senses, then you become qualified as a spiritual master. When you're endeavoring to control your senses, you qualify to become a disciple. So one who controls the 6 urges automatically controls the senses and is called a Goswamis. Control does not mean denial, but regulated use in the service of Krishna. Those who cannot control their senses cannot become devotees. That's a quote from Prahlad Maharaj, 7530. So why is this in the category of Shraddha? Because in the earlier stage, we don't really have faith. So then how do we get faith? We borrow faith. And who do we borrow it from? We borrow it from those who are manifesting these qualities. Yes, that is why this is in the stage of Shraddha or faith. And this is also the beginning of our own personal practices. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the first verse. And I do realize I'm over time, but if there are any questions or discussions, we can take a few minutes. Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
So I realized the 9 types of rasas, and we say relationship and mellows, and in there it says there's 6 types, 6 rasas, and they call it taste. Is it different words for rasa?
So the question is, there are 9 rasas, and there are the 6 vegas.
Yeah, and they call it rasas also. There's 6 kinds of rasa taste. So the word rasa could mean other things.
They're different things. So the rasas are the mellows in which we engage with Krishna. Right? The Dasyaras, Sakyaras, those are the mellows in which we engage. Or no, when you're talking about 9, what are you talking about? You're talking about.
No, I'm talking the word in itself. Like they call it in Nectar of Instruction the taste. They said rasas. They use the word rasas. So can we have 2 different kind of meanings, like relationship and taste?
Okay, I have to apologize. I still don't get your question. If you don't mind, if you can write to me.
I'll send you something. Yes.
Yeah, if you write to me, I can meditate on it a little bit and I can try and answer it.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ankuri Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you.